Well, good day, folks, and welcome back to The Secret Solved. This is a program where we look at the book The Secret and we try to come up with ideas that might be related to this treasure hunt. And for today's show, I'm going to be talking about some ideas for New York. And if you notice the first page that I put up there, I was looking at a window pattern that's in New York that's similar to that in the book. And it got me curious, and so I started investigating the building. Uh, and so I don't know if I'm onto anything or not, but anyway, so there's this building at 72 Park Row. And as I look at this arch structure over the windows, I get, the same idea, if you will. And I realize this pattern is you know, within New York often repeated. And if you want to go over and look at the Pace University building that's adjacent, you might want to look at the mural that's on the front of the building over there because it reminds me of the San Francisco image uh, because there's a wood relief on that building. But we're going to talk about this one. So this innocuous looking building here, it was actually the New York Times building. So this building that Pace University now occupies was the New York Times building uh, at this location. It was in what was called Newspaper Row, and it was originally the headquarters of the New York Times. And it's the oldest surviving structure of Lower Manhattan's former Newspaper Row. And since 1951, it's been the home of Pace University. Now, you might be having fun with me at this point in time, but if you understand it, the Pace University, uh, let's say, emblem, in other words, if you go look at the Pace University uh, New York Winchester seal, you've got the image of the seal having wearing a robe, very reminiscent to this image figure, as well as having a gaze off in the direction. And and just looking at this Pace University opportunity is basically what it says on it. But if you look at that, and stylistically, there's some that, especially that one arm with the draped opening, is you know so reminiscent of the image figure. But the New York Times building, again, it's the home of, or was the headquarters of the New York Times, and it was built by, I guess, there used to be. So the Times constructed the previous five-story building at 41 Park Row between 1857 and 1858 as its third headquarters. According to one account, it was built over the old cemetery of the brick Presbyterian church after the bodies had been removed. And I always like it when we find an overlapping aspect of another puzzle that's already been solved, that being the graveyards in Boston. I guess New York has no proclivity towards moving bodies out of graves, whereas Boston maybe doesn't do that quite as often. Uh, so the New York newspaper eventually moved to uh, the new location at One Times Square. And if you haven't heard of One Times Square, it's where they have the big ball drop every year, and it's one of the events that's watched by the most people around the world, if you will. But there's a bronze statue of Benjamin Franklin holding a copy of his Pennsylvania Gazette, and it stands in the square adjacent to this. That was dedicated in 1872. Okay, so again, I'm just looking at this building. I'm looking at these windows. I'm looking at the way in which this arch is structured. And I can't help but reminisce that, hey, does this look like what we might maybe should be looking for? Well, in order to gain further confirmation as to whether or not I'm on the right track, I always like to match the correct verse with the image. And so I'm going to use this last verse that says where M and B are set in stone. And I don't care if you say that's Manhattan. and Brooklyn, the Manhattan Bridge and the Brooklyn Bridge. Again, we have a bridge in the background. The arch structure, if you will, is a bridge. Okay, and so I'm okay with that. Uh, and to Congress, R is no. Roosevelt, if you like the street, Roosevelt's right there. L sits in left. If people like liberty, sits great. You've got the island out there in the Hudson River, and this is obviously a point that's over that shoulder. If you like Mayor Lindsay, and you like the fact that the mayor's office is generally close to this area, and this there's a park right here in general relationship to this as well. But beyond his left shoulder is the Fair Folks treasure holder. And I've been held up by this for a long time, by the end of 10 by 13. And I should have thought about this earlier, but I didn't, because I was a journalism student, editor of my high school paper. So if you're going to print a newspaper and you want it print ready, you need to have it formatted at 10 by 13. So your format for your printer, your printing specification, needs to be 10 by 13 if you're going to publish an 11 by 14 size paper. So if you lay out and you look at a paper, and a paper is usually one version 11 inches wide and it's 14 inches tall. Of course, you print this on a full sheet of paper, and so you get the dimensions of the paper being larger. But the one side of a paper is going to be 11 by 14 in one size newspaper layout. The printable image of this needs to be 10 by 13. It needs to be 10 by 13 in order to meet the margin requirements for the page. And so, again, this is one type of newspaper format size. And I don't know why I didn't think of this sooner. And the reason I say this is because in the back of the book, you've got the Hounds of News. There's one example of news printing, if you will. You've got a number of people that believe that there's something to do with Benjamin Franklin in this book. Well, you've got a Franklin statue right here at this location. The other thing that I think is in the back of the book, I have not been able to adequately explain very easily up until this point, is the newspaper that has Mr. Potato Head that's in front of the newspaper in the back of the book. I'm struggling finding that one because I didn't bookmark it. I thought I could find it easily. But I've had a hard time figuring out, the nomenclature. And there's 4 or 5 references in the back of the book that line up perfectly with newsprint, news printing, WordPerfect, having your paper. So if you look at the Damon Runyon, the Meadowlands is printed here, right? And you have an example on page 113 in the back of the book of newsprint. And you also have under here charts, and you have some other information in that image. The other one is in the Phantasmagory. You have an example of all of the different newsprint items that are in the Star and in People magazine. I'm not real sure what the standard size for a magazine is. Is it an 11 by 14? Are magazines 11 by 14? If so, your print to be print ready for all of those magazines pictured on page 117 would need to be formatted at a 10 by 13 in order to print appropriately on the page. Okay, I think I beat that horse dead enough. But if you do put this printing reference in here, and you now have located a building that looks very similar to the image outline, and it was at one time the New York Times building, what further confirmations could we look at to see that we're on the right track? Well, the New York Times then moved to the famous location at 1 Times Square. And I think possibly there's some idea of a ball dropping in here, One of the images that's really bothered me, and I think I've got it. I mean, I like it over at the Worth. I like it out over at the Worth Plaza. Uh, I really like it at that location. But you could also show this image on page, uh, wow, 133 in the back of the book, where you've got this guy standing on a ball. Now, that ball that the image figure on 133 is standing on, to me, that ball that the guy on page 133 is standing on is reminiscent of the globes that top a number of the things in New York. But if you look at this flag, the flag has got this container, this glass thing, if you will, descending down, and there's still part of the stick or a stick below that in that image. And I'm wondering if that's reminiscent of the ball drop in New York City. And again, I've already used this image once for an idea that I had over in Madison Square Park. But let's just say that, I'm not quite right on my flag and the need for the flag in a location. Um, but let's just say that is reminiscence of the ball drop in New York. Then I'm going to look up some history about the ball drop. And so the ball is a geodesic sphere. Oh my God. What we have? The geodesic something's in the back of the book? The geodesic gnome we have in the back of the book. Well, I don't really see him here, and he's only got like a half page, but he's in a park somewhere, right? And then he's in another place. But anyway, there's a tower in this one picture of the geodesic. Anyway, I don't know if this is it or not, but it's a spear. The ball is covered with 2688 crystal triangles. All right, well, you know about what the ball looks like. But let's look at the history. So revelers began celebrating New Year's Eve in Times Square as early as 1904, but it was in 1907 that the New Year's Eve ball made its maiden descent from the flagpole atop one Times Square. Uh, 7 versions of the ball have been designed to signal the new year. The first ball was iron and wood and adorned with 125-watt light bulbs. It was 5 feet in diameter and weighed 700 pounds. Here's where it gets interesting. It was built by a young immigrant metalworker named Jacob Starr. And again, there's a star over there in this one place. And for the most part of the 20th century, the company he founded, sign maker Art Craft Strauss, was responsible for lowering the ball. So the guy that actually lowered the ball was this guy by the name of Art Craft Strauss. If you got us all in San Francisco, you like Levi Strauss, you like the Strausses and all that. But anyway, as part of the 1907 and 1908 festivals, the maitre demons in the fabled lobster palaces and other deluxe eateries in the hotels surrounding Times Square were supplied with battery-powered top hats emblazoned with the numbers 1908, fashioned of tiny light bulbs. At the stroke of midnight, they all flipped their lids, and the year on their foreheads lit up in conjunction with the numbers 1908 on the parapet of the Times Square, lighting up signal the arrival of the new year. So it's been coming down since 1907, except for 2 years. But here's an interesting thing. The earlier celebrations for New Year's were held at Trinity Church. And only when the new Times Square building was built was the tradition of meeting at a place in New York become the Times Square. It used to be at Trinity Church. So in 1920, a 400-pound ball made entirely of wrought iron replaced the original, and then an aluminum ball. And then with this campaign called I Love New York in 1981. Oh, excuse me, I didn't read the whole thing. The aluminum ball remained unchanged until 1980, when red light bulbs and the addition of a green stem covered the ball into an apple for the 1981 year. So in 1981, the ball came down basically with red lights and a stem so that it looked like an apple dropping. As if an apple was dropping into, need I say, a cider press? Anyway, oh God, it took me a long time to get to that joke, didn't it? All right, so we have about time balls. The actual notion of a ball dropping to signal the passage of time dates back to long before New Year's Eve was ever celebrated in Times Square. The first time ball was installed atop England's Royal Observatory in Greenwich in 1833. It would drop at 1 o'clock every afternoon, allowing the captains of nearby ships to precisely set their chronometers, a vital navigational instrument, probably more important than a windrose. Anyway, around 150 public time balls are believed to have been installed around the world after the success at Greenwich, though few survive and still work. The tradition is carried on today in places like the United States Naval Observatory in Washington, D.C., where a time ball descends from a flagpole at noon each day. And of course, once a year in Times Square, where it marks the stroke of midnight, not for a few ships' captains, but for over 1 billion people watching worldwide. So, I mean, I find this history of the ball drop and all this interesting, if nothing else. I don't know if it'll help us solve the secret, but, I do. And I mean, I just look at that image and I look at the juggler and I look at that and I'm going, well, holy cow, that could be reminiscent of the ball drop. The inaugural bash in New Year's came about when a newspaper owner, German Jewish immigrant Adolf Oakes, successfully lobbied the city to rename Longacre Square, the district surrounding his paper's new home, in honor of the famous publication. A contemporary article in the New York Times credited Intra-Bureau Rapid Transit Company President August Belmont for suggesting the change to the Rapid Transit Commission. The impressive Times Tower, marooned on a tiny triangle of land at the intersection of 7th and Broadway and 42nd, was at the time Manhattan's second tallest building. The tallest if measured from the bottom of its four massive sub-basements, built to handle the heavyweight demands of the Times, up-to-date printing equipment. Okay, so in other words, this is a really tall building, but they had to put a big basement under it so it could handle all of the weight. And again, it was called Longacre Square. So that made me think about Green Acres, and maybe I've been misguided in my thoughts of who the guy wearing overalls are, and maybe the guy wearing overalls is actually in the Hooterville area. The Hooterville area. So there was two shows that came out. One of them was about Hooterville, and one of them was Green Acres, and it was, I think, a spinoff of Petticoat Junction. And since we had a petticoat affair over there in Chicago, we had a petticoat affair. There's a petticoat sitting on the top of Andrew Jackson's head in the Chicago image. And now we've got, I like it if I can find a petticoat affair and a Hooterville, if you will, in this puzzle. And there was this guy that basically wore overalls in both of those shows. And he might better describe the attributes of the guy that we see in the back of the book sitting on the canoes. And this guy's name is Hank Patterson. And Hank Patterson was a character actor. He played a whole lot of different roles. But anyway, he was instrumental in the role that he played on Green Acres. But anyway, again, we looked at the Hounds of News, and I think the news is in both the Cleveland solve, and I'm now starting to think maybe it has something to do with the solve here in the New York City, because it helps me explain why they've got the Meadowlands and the newspaper in here. a little bit better than they have in the past. So anyway, I don't know. I don't know if this idea helps me explain this one anymore, which I thought to be. Oh, it does. It does. It does. It does. If this is truly, if this is truly the lead character, if this is truly uh, who I think it is, and that's Miss Gorney. If this is truly Miss Gorney from Saturday Night Fever, she worked at a publicity house downtown, and I believe her job was to interview um, people for a magazine. Let me see if I can just look this up. I hate doing research while I'm live, but uh, what was Stephanie Mangano's job? Job in Saturday Night Fever. We'll see if it can answer this. Oh, this is just it. So, oh god, they got a paywall. Oh, that one has a paywall. Well, I know they go to I know they go to eat it. Uh, they go to eat it. White Castle. Um, oh, I hate doing research on the fly. Well, I know that that Tony was basically working at a paint store, but what she describes what her job was in that at one time. There's a scene where she describes what she does, and she just that when she comes out of the White Castle, she's said that her job involved her uh, interviewing with people like Joe Namath, and she mentioned another person and then another person in the scene where they come out of that, and so I'm pretty sure her job had to do with publishing newspapers or magazines or something like that. And if that's the case, I that's if that is the case, that explains her being on the train going from that would explain why she goes from Bath Beach over to New York to her job. And then she has an apartment basically over in New York. And the apartment, if you really want to know where the apartment was, I know too much about this movie. But anyway, the apartment that she had was over by Central Park. uh, The building was the focus of an unprecedented New Year's Eve celebration. Oak spared no expense to ensure a party for the ages. All-day street festival culminated in a fireworks display set off on the base of the tower. And at midnight, the joyful sound of cheering rattles and noisemakers from over 200,000 attendees could be heard. It was said from as far away as the Croton on Hudson, 30 miles north along the Hudson River. And there's a fountain called the Croton Fountain somewhere. Like it's close to um, where is the Croton Fountain? It's like right down here by the financial district in the park. So the Croton, and I don't just because it says it in this article doesn't mean I need to use it here. But if you look at this Croton water fountain, which is across Park Row, uh, uh, it's got like this shiny ball on the top of it, as if it's descended. Okay, maybe you've gone too far. No, but anyway, you've got that fountain there in the park. Uh, I don't know. It's across Park Place. Well, anyway, if you go back to my Green Acres analogy, Green Acres obviously was a TV show, but Zsa Zsa Gabor was the lady that was in, and she lived on Park Avenue. And I don't know if Park Avenue is the same as Park Row. The people in New York are yelling at me right now. They're yelling at their screen. But anyway, I put a few links up to this, a few things to look at. And if it suits your fancy and you think it's something of interest, I don't think there's anything wrong with looking at the possibility of a solve that's down by City Hall in this little tiny park, because I found this building, Pace University, which was the old New York Times building. And there's so much in the back of the book about the history of printmaking and all of that. And I don't know if you just went across the street from that New York Times building, you've got, a good amount of this park. And in the back of the book, and I don't know if you could use this image about birch trees here or not, but I'm going to show this to you because it bugs me. And every time I look at this thing in the back of the book, I get excited. Because I think it gives you the solve location. So most people don't dissect these images as much as I do, but I think this page gives you a lot of information for the different solve locations. And I say that because it's got the guy down here, it's got the refrigerator, it's got the bocce ball court over there. But what I want to look at is the pennant. The pennant sitting up there is bisected to where you have a little triangle, and you've got the hose or the sock going across it. And I don't know if I'm focused on where I need to be, but it's below where my finger is. And it's the pendant, whatever, sitting in the guy's room. And I think this is a solve location. I think that there's a little triangular park, and then there's more of the park on the other side, and that path is where you need to be looking. And I think there's a rebus in there, just as I think the pizza box has another possible solve idea in it as well. But if you like my idea of the cider vat thing, here's another container for beer, a keg, if you will. If you like my other location at Madison Square Park, it might be interesting to know that there used to be a velodrome there. A velodrome is a place where these bicycles would go. And I so believe one of these puzzles leads you to a velodrome somewhere. I just think that that's got to be part of it. And I don't know which puzzle leads you to that, but anyway, well, let's see if anybody's joined in today. Well, looks like we got Jeff wishing us a happy Saturday. Well, happy Saturday back to you. So what are your thoughts on this Pace University? Any thoughts on whether or not this could be it? Any thoughts on whether that ball dropping? So many people don't probably spend much time on this drawing, and I might just go into everything that I haven't talked about on this show yet. Most people don't go into this drawing about the passy fancies, but if you like my Madison Square Park solve idea, then you might appreciate the fact that in 1980, 95% of all the toys sold in the United States had something to do with the toy district in New York City. Over 90% of everything toy that was sold in 1980 had something to do with the either manufacturing process, development process in the toy district. In addition, that district was also responsible for much of the ephemera that had to do with ornaments. There's one store there that's now closed. That's a different store name now. But if you think there's anything that has to do with toys in the back. Okay, so let me explain what I think this image means, because I haven't done this one yet. Okay, so in the image, you have a whole bunch of people in the sky. To me, all the people that are in the sky in this image on page 109 are doing one thing. They're skydiving. Every one of the images on the Passy Fancies page are skydiving. And if you look around the Perrier bottle, you can see a group skydive, if you will. And so in 1980, skydiving was kind of taken off. Literally taking off. Oh, I don't know anything about New York either. All right, I got a phone call, but I'm gonna let that go. All right, so all these people in this image are skydiving. All right, well, so in the 1980s, skydiving was really popular. There'd been some advances in parachutes. They now didn't have to use this big round open chute. You can now jump out of the sky with a more sports type of parachute, which you can control a lot better. And people were taking this up as a hobby. Well, one guy that was doing this was a guy by the name of Ken Squires. And Ken Squires one day got the idea that he could jump out of a plane and land on the St. Louis Arch. Kind of like that arch back there in the corner that I have, which is a bear trap. But anyway, he thought he could land on the arch. Well, unfortunately, he couldn't do it. There's actually, and I didn't know this, but there's actually on top of the arch, there's a place where they go out the top of the arch, and it's got a hatch in it, and it allows you to then service all of the radio antennas and stuff on top of the arch. And we don't know if this guy thought he could land there and then come back in through. But anyway, as he got to the top of the arch, either the wind moved him away too far, or he lost his ability to land at the center. And I don't know if he had a backup parachute or not. But anyway, so he ended up sliding down one of the legs of the arch, and obviously he did a pretty good job. He was getting on the world's biggest slide. I mean, he got to the top of this huge slide, and he was going to slide down it. Well, he got to where the arch bend ends, and the ride, well, kind of spit him out into that hard sandy landing area, and he didn't make it. But it was written about in the papers. Okay, so I think this is a bunch of people that are skydiving. So why are they skydiving towards a Perrier bottle? Well, so Perrier was a fad, right? But okay, Perrier came from these artesian wells. Okay, these artesian wells. And artesian wells are naturally occurring wells that are underground and they provide water. Well, little known fact, and where do you think Budweiser in St. Louis gets its water to make its beer? From the river? Well, today they might. But if you were making beer in St. Louis, you were getting your water from the artesian wells that were under St. Louis, because there's 3 major artesian wells in that area. So what I think this image is telling you, that you need to find out something about skydiving, and you need to find out something about the Perrier bottle, and then figure out where skydiving and an artesian well intersect. And where they intersect is in St. Louis, where you have a bottle of something made from the water from artesian wells. And considering that this skydiving accident was pretty well written about, I don't think it's much of a deal. But if you want to know about some of these other things, so Frisbee invented the Super Bowl, a Super Ball. Hula hoop is a Whammo invention, came from California. The Davy Crockett coonskin hat was another craze. The Mickey Mouse ears was another craze. Wingtip shoes were another craze, especially if you were Tony. Anyway, then these glasses that are worn by this one guy, I think those were called Geordie glasses, because they came from like Star Trek. The smiley face, that's actually an apple when you really look at it. The guy that actually invented the smiley face was Harvey Ross Ball, and he worked for the state for the Mutual Life Insurance Company. And I always love it when I can find a ball, if you will. That was the Martian headband, is also known as a dealy bopper, and it was originally sold first at a Los Angeles street fair. And so In 1982, there in the 1982 Knoxville fair, Belushi was involved in making and doing some sort of skit. The Love shirt, Love on the guy's shirt, that's a Robert, Indiana a creation. The original stood outside MoMA. What is the MoMA? It's like an art thing, right? Uh, and then Robert Clark is an artist of Chicago, and he's the flying monkey guy. Well, anyway, so those are some of the people that actually invented this. The peace symbol on that guy actually came out of a nuclear thing, and I can't remember what nuclear thing it was. And then obviously got a ukulele. The ukulele fad was another one. So David Gerald or David Friedman was a sci-fi writer who wrote The Land of the Lost, and he's mentioned in the text. What else do we have? Oh, the Mork and Mindy is the suspenders. They came out of like the Mork and Mindy thing. All right. Well, anyway, so there are some of my thoughts on that particular image. So I'm just going to kind of go through the ones that I haven't talked about before. That I pulled a lot of information on. But I'm pretty sure that one has to do with St. Louis. I'm wondering if the Teen Angels and the Elvis Presley section, if I haven't appropriately matched any of these to where they belong. I don't know if this means that one of them could be close to a pool. I don't know what the pool hall. It could be just Brunswick. And I need to find out some more information of Brunswick. I'm pretty sure that's a Kaiser automobile. And this is why I don't think the people that are looking at San Francisco have it right. Because if I want to put together a solve at Long Beach, I can use up the Kaiser. I can then use up the idea of the Flying Fortress, the Spruce Goose, and I can add another line of thinking into my puzzle. It's bothered me. I haven't figured out if that's supposed to be Mrs. Butterworth, and I'm supposed to look into maple syrup. And if I am, or is that Aunt Jemima, or is that Mrs. Buttersworth, and it's maple syrup of a different type? Well, let's just say it has to do with maple syrup. Well, I mean, you're gonna have a spout. It's got to come out somewhere. Or maybe this is just the overlooked distillery. The smoking thing, the filthy hobbit. I don't know if you're just supposed to look for people that smoke. I haven't got really good handle on this one. I think if you find that tower of the alfalfa, I think if you find that tower somewhere, you've got a pretty good chance of finding where that guy goes. Bugs the heck out of me that this guy is pulling on the stocking. By the way, those the rainbow design for Judy Garland, that shoe was designed for Judy Garland, by the way. So Ferragamo made shoes for the Marahari of Coachella or somewhere. It has an India reference. Salvador Ferragamo invented the platform sandal. So that's where that sandal basically originated. Alan Gant is responsible for the hose and the Macy's Day Parade. And I can't remember exactly where the Macy's store is in New York, but if it's near Madison uh, Square Park, I maybe could do a little bit of additional matching there. Uh, in this image, I know there's a tower building of some sort. And again, I wish I had the high resolution book, but I'm not going to spend $500 for that. Uh, and so I'm pretty sure if you figured out, what that is in that picture, you could get some more information. Um, I think this might be Babe Ruth. I think that might be Babe Ruth. I don't. I mean, it looks a little bit like Babe Ruth, but I don't know. I can't say for sure if that would be Babe Ruth. I've extensively talked about this flagpole and me thinking that's the ball dropping from the flag because the original ball drop had to do with it falling from the flag on top of the building. The other reason I like that idea is look at the hands of the guy in the image. The hands of the guy in the image. That's the international sign for timeout. Timeout. Times Square. He's calling a timeout. I don't know. Maybe I just see these things in these images that I shouldn't be seeing. That maybe aren't even there. But and I still think that looks like the Worth. I still think that looks like the Worth Monument. I still think that looks like the Worth Monument. And it would have to do with the U.S.-Mexico border because of the Mexican-American War. I haven't got a real good hold on who the Mira Chimera is. I wish I knew more, or excuse me, the evil necromancer. I just wish I could figure that one out a little bit more. I tried to figure that one out. I came up with Patty Hearst. I came up with Luella Parsons, who was the queen of the Hollywood. I found out some information about Marion Davis. Rudy Valentino, I believe, came up in this as well because of either the Sheiks and the Vamps. I believe he was in both of those. So the Sheiks and the Vamps that are mentioned in the text under the evil necromancers, those were two movies that Rudy Valentino were in. So there was another mention of Valentine Davies, and he was in the Coast Guard and graduated from the University of Michigan. That was a couple of Valentine. So I don't know if that was the person's name here or not, but I will say that the crown on top of the head of that is, I think, a fence. I think that this is actually a fence or a fixture that you might want to be looking for, and it's going to be related to the image figure in that picture. I've talked at length about the Tupper werewolves and ketchup and mustard. I think this tells you that there's a Capitol dome or a city office with a dome very close in proximity to a solve idea. And if this is Mayor Lindsay in New York, or this could be White House closest. But I don't know if that's actually the White House in Washington, D.C. or some other. But I think Ben Asen did photoshopping because look at the steps going up to that building. And then look at the building in the background. And doesn't it look like he cut and overlaid the stepped entrances to that Capitol building? In other words, that part where my finger is a different building because the windows do not line up quite right. And you can see a border at the bottom and the top of that portion of what I consider the Photoshop. So I think he might have taken the original picture in front of a Capitol, and I'd like to have him produce the negative. So for those people who have been following along with Ben Asen, so Ben basically has been doing some selling of his artwork from The Secret on his website, and he's offered certain proofs uh, from the originals, but he claims to have lost some of them. Well, I believe he's lost some of them because if he would give me this one, it would probably show that he photoshopped in a different set of steps underneath that Capitol building. And so he can't produce the original image of this because it doesn't exist. The one that would exist would show a different set of steps. It would show a different set of steps in front of that building. And you can tell that the windows don't line up. And where the hell are these steps going? I mean, where the hell are those steps going? Directly into the window? And so when you understand that the reason Ben Asen can only produce certain photographs from the back of the book, and the only reason he can do that is because some of the images that were actually printed were photoshopped. And bless your heart, back in 1980, when I was doing mock-ups for the paper, it was a hell of a process to go in the darkroom and photo finish a mock-up of something that wasn't the original picture. I mean, it took some effort to make a quality Photoshop. Uh, but when you only had to Photoshop in one item, it wasn't that difficult. But there you go. I one time thought that this was Walter Matthau and Lemon, who were the odd couple. And the odd couple obviously had a apartment in New York. But here it says the Simp Trog hails from North and or South Dakota, but can never agree on which one. And so I don't know why they're sending you out to the Dakotas. I do know that John Lennon was shot in front of the Dakota Hotel in New York, and the John Lennon was shot by a guy by the name of Chapman, and Johnny Appleseed is also named Johnny Chapman. But I can't just go everywhere on some of this stuff. But anyway, so I thought maybe that was the odd couple. Uh, uh, this also could be the honeymooners, but they weren't really an odd couple. But it would help me with my solve, and it would help me with my solve if that's Jackie Gleason and the lady that played his wife in the honeymooners. I think we know in this figure. I'm pretty sure we know that that's got to be MacArthur, and the barber is Eisenhower, and the Pythagorean has to do with the military-industrial complex. The Wooly Bully was discussed today on Facebook, so there's your Wooly Bully. I just talked about her a minute ago. I've made no progress on this image whatsoever. I've not made any progress, and maybe it's because it's a place I haven't had a solve idea for yet. But The Call of the Wild was written by Jack London, and that's mentioned in the text. There was a dog story. There's a story about the Klondike. And there's something about the Call of the Wild is a story about a gold rush dog by the name of Buck that was stolen and then sold into some sort of dog show. And this is why it's so like Balto over in the park. Oh, I forgot to mention, by the way, the name of the Pace University mascot, they're the Setters. So if you like the verse that ends in hush for New York, oh, I forgot to mention that. God, that was a good one. So if you like the verse that says, Vincent fixture central to for finding jewel cask, seek the sounds of rumble, brush, and music. Hush! You're the Setters. Hush! Hush! Oh, anyway. But if somebody can help me with that one, I have no idea where that's at. Uh, so I don't know. It looks like that might be underneath a pine tree of some sort. Uh, uh, if it's in a pine bush, pine grove, it looks like this guy might be stepping on some needles. Um, so London was all over the place. So John Griffin Cheney, Jack London, son of canal builder, father unknown, or astrologer William Cheney. That's based. So I had that information from uh, some of the information in the text. Uh, Famous Americans Boone, Lewis and Clark, Teddy Roosevelt, to name but a bunch, enjoy reputations as explorers. What they really did was to follow a capricious bugbear and get lost in the woods. And maybe this is Marquette. Maybe this has to do with the Perry Marquette statue, um, the bugbear, uh, because they don't mention him along with Boone, Lewis and Clark, or Teddy Roosevelt, but he did. He was in some way an explorer. And then the Bogarts is mentioned in this one, so I imagine maybe Humphrey Bogart has something to do with this one. And then L.L. Bean could provide you some information. Uh, well, I'll come back and maybe do one more show on the rest of these. So what are you guys up to today? What are you guys up to? I don't want to go more than an hour. I think there's football coming on. Or maybe it's already on. I don't know. Well, anyway, that's my thoughts on what it was working on this morning, and I got to quit working on this. But the weather's going to get better next week. It's already up to 22 degrees today, so I'll be getting out of the house. Yesterday, it finally got up to 6 degrees, I think, or 7, maybe 11. I don't know. So I just do this in the wintertime when I'm bored doing anything else to do. Any final thoughts? Final thoughts from the Peanut Gallery? Well, seeing no final thoughts, we will sing the closing song, The Tie That Binds, or whatever. I'm going to play that album over there one of these days and just start playing it and walk away. And I got something I can play it on, and then we'll just have a little Wizard of Oz music for the whole entire hour. Okay, folks, thanks so much for joining in. I'm going to go see if I can find a football game, break up my day, and we'll catch you later. I might see if there's any Forrest Finn shows on. You guys have a good day.